On the basis of these definitions and its research, Human Rights Watch finds that Israeli authorities are committing the crimes against humanity of apartheid and persecution.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. Apartheid, the vicious system of discrimination and hatred for which the Republic of South Africa was so infamous. The United Nations declared it an international crime in 1973. And by the 90s, apartheid in South Africa was gone. But then there is the case of Israel, with its own discrimination and hatred. See what the world-famous group Human Rights Watch says about Israel.
Apartheid. While many associate the word with South Africa, apartheid is a universal legal term that refers to severe discriminatory oppression. Apartheid is also a crime against humanity. Its definition in the 1973 Apartheid Convention and the 1998 Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court is made up of three key elements: an intent to maintain the domination by one racial group over another, systematic oppression by one racial group over another, and one or more inhumane acts as part of that oppression. Persecution is a crime against humanity under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. It is made up of two primary elements: a discriminatory intent leading to severe deprivation of fundamental rights of a racial, ethnic, or other group. On the basis of these definitions and its research, Human Rights Watch finds that Israeli authorities are committing the crimes against humanity of apartheid and persecution. Human Rights Watch finds that the elements of the crimes come together in the occupied Palestinian territory, pursuant to an Israeli government policy to maintain the domination by Jewish Israelis over Palestinians across Israel and the occupied territory. In the occupied territory, that intent has been coupled with systematic oppression and inhumane acts committed against Palestinians living there. The Israeli government is the main authority across Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. In these areas, Israeli officials have demonstrated a discriminatory intent to maintain domination over Palestinians by ensuring control over land and demographics by Jewish Israelis. Take the Jerusalem municipality as an example. The Israeli authorities' goal is to maintain a sizable Jewish majority by boxing in Palestinian areas while helping predominantly Jewish areas to flourish. Israeli authorities maintain a two-tier system which privileges Jewish Israelis over Palestinians. The means used by Israeli authorities in the occupied territory amount to the systematic oppression needed to establish the crime of apartheid. Israeli authorities have committed a range of abuses against Palestinians. In the occupied territory, those abuses include mass land confiscation, the denial of residency rights, and the suspension of civil rights, and rise to the threshold of inhumane acts and severe abuses of the fundamental rights of Palestinians. The international community should recognize the reality on the ground for what it is and press the Israeli authorities to end apartheid and persecution.
Of course, Human Rights Watch wasn't the first to notice this. The mostly Israeli Jewish group B'Tselem called out Israeli apartheid this January. Israel Shachak, who was the leader of the Israeli League for Human and Civil Rights, talked about apartheid in his country in 1988. And of course, Palestinians saw the resemblance with South African apartheid many years before that. This last week, the Israeli paper Haaretz had two articles about the end of a Ministry of Justice investigation into a totally outrageous body cavity search of a Palestinian woman in 2015. It took Israeli investigators and lawyers 5 years to decide nothing could be done and no one should be punished. Read about it by going to the homepage of thestruggle.org. Last week we showed you video of Rabbi Ascherman being beaten by a probable Israeli settler in early April. It's been 3 weeks with no arrests. Promoting Enduring Peace is trying to support their 2011 Gandhi Peace Award winner. They ask that you send a simple email. Go to peace.org for details. A Zoom event coming up on May 8th, Saturday at 5 p.m. Supporters of despots don't belong in left spaces. Michael Karagias from Sydney, Australia, Linda Kikovics from New Mexico, and Shyam Galyan from Texas will diagnose and talk about a remedy for those foolish or nasty leftists who support tyrants like the rulers of China, Syria, Iran, Nicaragua, and Russia. In West Haven, Connecticut, scores of workers who did the cleaning at the University of New Haven say they were fired by the university's subcontractor, a company called Diversified. On a very windy April 22nd, they stood outside the main entrance to the college. Most of the workers are Latinx. They were organized by Unidad Latina and Acción.
¿Cuándo? ¿Qué queremos? ¿Cuándo? ¿Qué queremos? ¿Cuándo? ¿Qué queremos? ¿Cuándo? ¿Qué queremos? ¿Cuándo? When do we want it? Shame on! Shame on! ¿Qué queremos? ¿Cuándo? ¿Qué queremos? ¿Cuándo? The reason we are here is because they were getting abused by the company Diversified, who provide the cleaning services for the UNH. So part of the abuses is that they were not getting paid overtime. And the way they were not paying overtime is when one worker was making more than 40 hours a week, they were forcing the workers to provide a false name and false identification. So at the end of the week, the workers, they were receiving 2 checks, one in their name and the other one in the name of somebody else. And that way they were avoiding pay overtime to the workers. The other problem they have is the company. The other problem was the company or the supervisors, they were having trabajadores fantasmas or phantom workers. So basically they were paying somebody who never worked, but they were overworking the rest of the workers. So it looks like some of the supervisors like Mari or Mayra and Cindy, they were taking the checks with them. The other problem they have in this company is anytime they were asking for their rights, they cut the hours on them. Or basically they got fired, or basically they stopped calling them. And that's a shameful. That's not the right way to treat the workers. Eventually the workers, they decide to start a union. So they got in contact with the 32BJ, and for like a few months, they start organizing the workers. Guess what? They got fired. All of them, all these workers who were like asking for their rights, and they were like trying to organize a union, they got fired. So eventually they find different jobs. And eventually, Nora Garcia, one of the leaders, died by COVID. So, but Nora Garcia, before she died, she got in contact with Unidad Latina and said, if we can now organize a union, let's do something else. And that's how we came together again. And that's why we're calling this collective Nora Garcia's Collective. And that's why we're here. What we are asking the university to do, we're asking the university to end the contract with the diversified company. We're also asking the Labor Department to investigate the diversified company. And we also are asking the university to hire a different company, and for the workers who got fired, who got exploited for years, to be reinstated with their jobs. ¡Sinvergüenzas! 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 ¡Ladrones! 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 Básicamente esa campaña para organizar el sindicato duró varios meses.
Comrades, this is the time for us to get together and claim our sense of justice and dignity against the company Diversified.
Estamos pidiéndole a la Universidad de New Haven que retire a esta compañía que está explotando el personal simplemente porque queremos un trabajo digno, pero están abusando de todos nosotros.
We are asking the university to reject the contract it has with Diversified because it is exploiting the workers, treating them as slaves, violating their human rights and their sense of dignity.
We are workers, not slaves. We are workers, not slaves. We are workers, not slaves. Cleaning workers, we are essential workers. Cleaning workers, we are essential workers.
Speaking of Unidad Latina en Acción, or ULA, they're organizing a May Day celebration May 1st on the New Haven Green. Entertainments from noon to 4, and then a march through New Haven streets. Now this almost unbelievable report from Democracy Now!
2 Ivy League schools have issued apologies this week for their handling of the remains of an African-American child killed by the Philadelphia police in the 1985 bombing of the home of the radical Black liberation anti-police brutality group MOVE. The apologies came after revelations that the remains of a child who was a victim of the bombing were reportedly given to anthropologist Alan Mann, a now retired Princeton University professor, and held in the Penn Museum for years. The Penn Museum is the University of Pennsylvania's Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. And that the bones were recently used in an online teaching course by Penn Museum curator Janet Mong, a visiting Princeton University professor. The online course was called Real Bones: Adventures in Forensic Anthropology. It was used, the bones, without permission from the family of the children. Students at Princeton have held a protest on campus Wednesday to support the MOVE community, who held another protest at the same time at the the Penn Museum in Philadelphia. This is one of the speakers.
They say it's okay because they think, oh, well, this is a part of this cultural moment. This is how the science goes. This is how we do it. We have to do this. This is what excuses us experimenting on human beings. They've been doing this to our black bodies for hundreds of years. In the name of science, in the name of study. We are not subjects of study. We are human beings, goddammit, and our lives matter.
That's right.
Philadelphia City Council person Jamie Gautier, who was responsible for issuing the apology for the MOVE bombing, also spoke at the protest Wednesday outside the University of Pennsylvania.
The University of Pennsylvania has apologized for its role in this situation, but an apology is not enough. Saying it won't happen again is not enough. The damage is already done, and now everyone involved needs to be held accountable for their actions. The Africa family is owed a full explanation of what happened by the university and by the city of Philadelphia, who transferred the remains to Professor Mann without consent. And the family is also owed some form of restitution to compensate for this egregious act.
This week, the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, known as the Penn Museum, apologized via Twitter, saying, quote, "We understand the importance of reuniting the remains with the family, and we're working now to find a respectful, consultative resolution." Princeton University President Christopher Eisgruber issued a statement saying he's, quote, "concerned over reports that the remains were used for instruction on campus," and said he would launch a fact-finding effort conducted by outside counsel. Earlier this week, Democracy Now! Spoke with Mike Africa Jr., a second-generation MOVE member who was 6 years old when Philadelphia police bombed the MOVE home.
I don't trust the Penn Museum. I don't trust Princeton. I definitely want to say that there's more to come with this. There needs to be accountability because the reaction, the people, the Penn's reaction to this is totally unprofessional. Making an apology through a statement through someone else, and the whole thing is egregious.
This week, 70 Princeton professors, including Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor, Imani Perry, and Eddie Glaude, signed on to a letter published in the campus newspaper calling on the university to act. The group writes, quote, "The university should move beyond denial to pursue restitution and repair. The victims of the MOVE bombing, their families, and those of us at Princeton invested in Black history and communities deserve more," they said. To begin our look at what all of this means, we go to Princeton University, where we're joined by Aisha Tair, a senior who is an African-American studies major. She helped organize a protest on campus Wednesday to support the MOVE community's demands. Aisha, welcome to Democracy Now! Talk about what you are demanding.
So what we demanded, we wanted in our demands to kind of show the complexity of the matter and the fact that it wasn't simple when we came up with the demands, acknowledging that justice and accountability looks very different for the family and how it could look for us and the people at this institution who are calling for accountability here. So one of our most important kind of factors was that we want Princeton to work with the family and work with them and kind of try to understand how they can repair that part of the harm that has happened. But on the side of the institution, which, this routinely happens where vulnerable people are exploited in the name of research and lab scientific knowledge. And so our demands here really focus on the freedom of Mumia Abu-Jamal. Princeton has countless financial resources. We want them to work with the family and with the organizations on the outside to free Mumia Abu-Jamal, knowing that what we're really fighting for beyond accountability is also human life, and Mumia is still in prison, and we would like for Mumia to be free. Our other most important demand is that we make sure that this never happens again. This was able to happen because Princeton does not have practices in place which kind of center the preciousness of human life, and it allows vulnerable people to be used as lab subjects. And so we asked for the faculty who signed on to the op-ed that you just talked about. We asked that those faculty overlook a kind of like an accountability, also do an investigation into the anthropology department, and they work with people on the outside and people on the inside to see how the department needs to change, and we're going to echo that.
They use the children's bones as teaching tools. And this in the 21st century? If those children had been white, would their bones have been treated so indifferently? Now for some better news from Democracy Now!
The Indian Point nuclear power plant is permanently shutting down today following decades of protests. The plant is located just 25 miles north of New York City. Decommissioning the plant is projected to take 12 years at a cost of over $2 billion. And Germany's highest court has ruled the government must expand its efforts to reduce carbon emissions in order to protect future generations. The ruling came in a lawsuit brought by a group of youth climate activists, including Sophie Baxen.
We are super happy and relieved after the court's decision. The decision is a huge success for us young people. It has become clear that parts of the climate protection law do not correspond with our constitutional rights. Effective climate protection has to be implemented now and not in 10 years' time when it will be too late.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
Back to the question of apartheid over the land that Israeli government rules. One group that has been calling the Israeli system apartheid is Queers Against Apartheid. That lets me transition to the memory of a leader who died several months ago. I've been meaning to remember Jerimarie Liesegang, who died in November. She was the first trans person I ever knowingly met. She was a strong supporter of Palestinian rights. Here's an interview I did with her in Hartford at a protest in support of Chelsea Manning, who was known as Bradley Manning at the time. Jerimarie, Queers Without Borders is the main sponsor of this demonstration. Why your group in particular?
Okay, well, one is because our name is Queers Without Borders. We are a collective of queers, so we have a lot of allies who work with us too. And our key thing is that there are not borders. A lot of times in society we build borders between groups, organizations, issues, things like that, but our lives are multi-issues, and Queers Without Borders is a multi-issues. It's a lot in sort of the history of the Gay Liberation Front. Gay Liberation Front started really in support of the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, you know, the queer movements, etc., but it really believed in coalition work. In time, that was really sort of usurped by single issues. Like today, we have marriage as the big issue. So if you say to someone, I'm queer, they ask you immediately about marriage, not about immigration rights, immigration issues, access to health care, etc. And so that's why we're here. As well as Bradley Manning is a queer hero.
So talk about the Bradley Manning case. How do you feel about what he did and what is being done to him?
I think what Bradley Manning did is what anyone, it really first took a lot of courage. But what he did, and everyone agrees, is the information he had access to did not harm anyone in society. That was well stated. throughout from the government, through the military and other folks, everybody clearly agrees that there was no harm done by this. In fact, if you look at the collateral murder video, which actually redefines collateral damage into its true word as collateral murder, you'll see that he actually exposed murder by our U.S. government and by our soldiers in Iraq. And so clearly what he is showing the truth on things, and the government is simply trying to hide the truth from the people so that people continue to support a military-industrial complex.
Well, I was watching Brian Williams on national news, and he presented it all in a very sensational way. He said some of the information that Manning released was found in the information cache of Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, and does he have proof for it? You know, I mean, what people want to do is they want to stop the Fourth Estate, and that's the media and people telling the truth. And so you have corporations, you have the media who are controlled by corporations, politicians who are controlled by corporations, and they are attempting to try to control the message. You won't hear that in Democracy Now! If you listen to Democracy Now!, which really gives you a true truth of the issues and a balance to it, you'll find what the truth is. But the reality is there's so many false truths about Osama bin Laden and what he had and things like that. I doubt very seriously if he even has any concrete proof of that. You know, so it's all forgive me.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Finally, flowers. The New York Botanical Garden is open again, at least for members. Nature there dazzles, and its big exhibit, Kusama Cosmic Nature, will bring on many smiles. That's our program for today. Stay safe, folks, but get active. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.